Hello, and welcome to everyone. My name is Alex Batchelor. I'm the chair of Watch Me Think, a former chair of the Marketing Society and a fellow. And I'm delighted to be hosting what is going to be part 12 of our Global Conversation series in partnership with Accenture Interactive. And for those of you who don't know, Accenture Interactive helps its clients drive sustainable growth by reimagining experiences in that kind of chain. And today's session is very much all around that, how to succeed in a demanding age of customer experience. And what I think we're finding, and what I'm hoping we're going to hear from our panel participants in a minute, but from Nina first, is that actually marketeers have a constant battle really to keep pace. The customer's changing. Nowhere has that been more dramatic and more unusual, perhaps, than over the last kind of like 18 months. And they're under a lot of pressure, I think, marketeers, to declutter marketing, to focus on what really matters, to discard the things that don't, and to rewire their kind of experiences and their businesses, to be honest. So we'll hear more about this and how to outperform your competitors, and particularly on why leading businesses are trying to move on, I suppose, from KPIs. I still remember when KPIs were a new thing, more these days to customer performance indicators, CPIs, I think. And before I hand you over to Nina, who's going to share some more information on the topic, I just wanted to remind a couple of quick housekeeping things. So the first one is this event is being conducted under kind of Chatham House rules. So please don't go quoting. If there are any material shared with you and stuff, then I'm very happy. But I think if we want to encourage people like Saurav and Maria to come on to calls like this, and Nina herself, and be honest and talk to you realistically about the problems they're facing inside their businesses, then we're going to do it under Chatham House rules. And we do also want to encourage as much kind of Q&A and interaction as possible. There is actually a Q&A function you should see at the bottom of your screens, and also a kind of chat function as well if you want to use that. But put in any kind of questions, say hello in the chat. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Nina Holdaway, who is the Managing Director at Accenture Interactive. Nina, I'm told, entered her 1930s from the sky, doing a skydive, and is planning to do the same for her 50th, this time with her 18-year-old daughter in tow. I can't believe you're either old enough to have an 18-year-old daughter or to be 50, but anyway, we'll discreetly draw a veil over that, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for the introduction. And yes, sadly, I've now got less than a year to go to this major event in my life, which felt a lot better in my 30s than it will do, I'm sure, in my 50s. So thank you. And a very warm welcome to everyone. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Nina Holdaway, as Alex said, I'm from Accenture Interactive. Equally delighted to be partnering with the Marketing Society today in this global conversation around success in the age of customer experience. So to kick us off, what I wanted to do was share some headlines from a recent piece of research that actually hasn't even been launched yet. So Chatham House rules, back to Alex's point, really important, but I want to share some of those headlines that deal with the big marketing transformation that is going on out there, with those organizations that are having success and are doing very well with it, and sharing some of what we are finding in our research that they are doing, and also talking about how they are measuring success, which is a really important element of this. So, but before we start, let's draw our mind back to the pandemic. So we have been through massive change in the last 18 months. For many of us, our kitchens became schools, our dining rooms became our offices, and perhaps a few of us were doing some exercise in our living rooms as well. So profound change in so many ways in our lives and on our customers. And unfortunately, and I guess it's no surprise, that what this has led to in many cases is exhaustion. So looking at a recent global employee study, as much as 44% out there of marketeers like us out there, and other functions as well, are just reporting feeling totally exhausted. And perhaps an even more shocking figure is indicating that as much as 40% globally are actually considering as a result quitting their jobs. So very much happening in the here and now, and perhaps particularly prevalent in marketing, and I think we all know why. So we have been through a huge amount of change. Our customers have. They have totally rethought their ethics. They have rethought what their needs are, and as a result, of course, with our companies and our brands, we've also had to take an increasing responsibility for issues, socioeconomic issues, sustainability issues, and thinking about what we can do to better serve those customers as they are changing in real time. And of course, we haven't had enormous budgets to do this either. In many of my clients' case, the budgets, if anything, have been shrinking. And the pressure is on, right? The pressure is absolutely on to still delivering business results like it always has been. And marketing, we all know, with the big digital transformation, digital revolution, marketing has changed beyond belief. So it hasn't become less complex, it's become more complex. We have the fortune of having more tools, but there are also many more touch points with our customers, many more channels. So the workload for us has increased, not decreased. But the interesting thing in the study that we have done, and it's worth pointing out that the study has gone out and interviewed over 1,000 marketing organizations. And what the study has revealed is that there is a small group out there of about 17% that are absolutely thriving and having the best time they've ever had. And when you speak to the marketing execs in those organizations, that 17% group, 86% of them are saying that their employees couldn't be more energized at the moment, having found renewed purpose and feeling exceptionally motivated about serving their customers' need in new and different ways. And this group we have called the Thrivers, and I'm going to be telling you a bit more about what it is that they do. So if we take a look at all the segments that we've uncovered in our study, and the segments have been based on how these organizations are relating to their customers, so the relationships that they are having, how motivated are they serving, how much better do they believe that they are now serving their customers, and how close do they feel to the values and the motivations of their customers. So that's how we've segmented. And perhaps if we start at the opposite end of thriving, at the surviving end of the equation, there is a similar sized group to the Thrivers that we have called the Survivors. So these are the ones that sadly haven't succeeded through the pandemic. They have, if anything, lost touch with their customers, so they are thinking about their customers the way things once were. Many of them are in denial about change even being permanent or taking place. They can see things changing, but they are saying, oh, things will soon go back to normal. And they're burnt out. A large proportion of this group will probably belong to the group I talked about, 44% that they're saying we're absolutely exhausted, we're burnt out. So that's the bottom end segment, if you like. We've then got, interestingly, a very large group in the middle that we call the Strivers. So they're about 2/3, and they are really persevering. They're trying exceptionally hard, but are feeling the pressure of that landscape that I just painted, of more complexity, lots to do, and limited budgets. And perhaps where they haven't yet got to is really finding that way of getting under the skin of their customer and how their needs are changing, and therefore being able to serve them in the right way. But they are trying to make an impact, and the will is definitely there, but they haven't always got the way. So that's the strivers, and then back to the ones that are succeeding and are making things happen out there. So what is it that we have found about that group? Well, at an overall level, what we are seeing is that they have found a way of cutting through. They have found a way of decluttering this rather complex landscape. And they have found that new motivation of re-looking at what they were doing and feeling that ongoing connection with the customer, and through that finding ways through that they can better serve their customers. And customer, I should say, is right at the heart of absolutely everything they do. So that's where they are winning. They have found a way to put that at the heart of all of their strategies and activity. And in terms of performance, it won't come as a surprise that if you compare the top end to the bottom end, of course, they are 1.4 times more likely to do well when it comes to revenue and profitability, 1.8 times more likely to perform well when it comes to customer satisfaction, and more than twice as likely to surpass, in terms of lifetime value, really deliver. So that those are the thrivers, and they are really up for this, and ready for this, and are fired up, and probably feel closer to customers than they ever have felt. And what I thought we would do is share with you what the researchers uncovered in terms of some of the rules that these thrivers apply and live by, some of the things that they do to be able to do quite so well and galvanize their teams. So the first one is they have recognized early on the need to reacquaint themselves with the customers. So they haven't just said, well, we know our customers, we know what we're doing. They have appreciated the fact that they will need to do that again and do that fresh and do that in real time. They've typically invested ahead of the curve when it comes to applying and implementing the right technology for listening purposes, for engagement purposes, and they've been out there in the market engaging in real time with their customers. And they've also, I said I was going to come on to measurement, which I'll do in just a moment. They also have a different way of orienting their business around what really matters, by putting customer outcomes at the heart of what they do. And I'll explain a little bit more around how they make that work. The second rule that they apply and live by is finding their collective difference. They are working really hard to differentiate. They recognize the need to differentiate in the market, and they then work very hard across and up and down the organization to be able to gather together the right data to get to the right insight about what it is that will help set them apart. And they then galvanize the team around that. So they create a common understanding in their organization about what it is that sets them apart, and they galvanize the team. And I should mention, of course, as well, these people really recognize the importance of the fact that it starts from the top. And there are so many conversations I've had in the last 18 months with organizations talking about exactly that. How do you engage your CEO? How do you engage the board or C-suite? What does it take to educate them in some of the matters close to the customer's heart? So how do we bring them as close to the customers as we are as marketeers? And equally, when it comes to some of the tech landscape, how do we actually educate them so we're all on a level playing field? So finding their collective difference is really important. Perhaps an obvious one, the third one, is moving at the pace of change. So they really realize that we have no time to rest on our laurels. The only way we can lead and stay in a leading position is by moving quickly. So when it comes to test and learn, or test and learn and then tweak and try again, they've absolutely perfected that, and that permeates the whole of their teams. And importantly, they are carefully working on the right things. So they're not working on everything. They're quite carefully selecting what is top of the agenda in alignment with the rest of the C-suite, and working on customer needs the way they are right now. The fourth thing that they do and that they spend time on is figuring out what it is no one wants to do. So there are many mundane tasks in the life of marketeers and others, but some of them are actually critically important. But I guess the question they're asking themselves is, how can this be done differently? Yes, there may be a conventional, part that talks about or thinks about delegation, but more likely it's about automating certain processes or industrializing their operations, so that that becomes part of the declutter, and what the talented marketeers can really focus on is where they can add the most value to the customer. So really important to take some of the complexity out doing that. And then last but not least, really own what it is that you stand for. So they don't just talk about their purpose, they absolutely embody it, and it goes right the way through their organizations. So finding that they embrace the fact that customers are changing, they don't push against it, and if anything, they see that as an opportunity to start fresh and create new, and feel super excited about it, and have used this period of 18 months to really rethink and turn on its head the role that we have as marketeers, and that the whole marketing function have, working more broadly and across the whole of the organization. So those are the 5 rules, if you like, that we have uncovered and identified amongst the thriving marketing organizations. And I did promise I was going to come briefly on to talk about measurement as well, which is an important part of it. So many of you may have worked with customer performance indicators. And probably many more of you will have worked with KPIs or key performance indicators. The notion and the thought behind CPIs, which is what these types of organizations are trying to implement, is to think in terms of customer outcomes. So what is the outcome that I am looking to achieve for my customer, and how, in what increments can I measure those? And you will see that there are a few examples. It might be a question of saving time, or it could be a question of helping the customer save money, or providing better and more convenience or accessibility, any of those. So CPIs, and then using those, once you've uncovered what really does matter to your customer, use that yet again as a way of galvanizing the whole organizations. And I don't just mean marketing organizations necessarily, but cross-functionally, all the teams, even those that are not front-facing and directly servicing or serving customers, can do that as well. Now, many of you will have, I'm sure, worked with CPIs. Some have tried and perhaps gone wrong. And when it comes to the mistakes that companies are sometimes making trying to implement these, it's of course very easy to look at what someone else is doing and perhaps adopting their CPIs. Whereas what of course you really want to be doing is you want to tap into that rich data that you've got across there, that you need to have across your organization, that rich body of insight, and think about, what do you know about your customers that is going to give you a clue as to what really matters to them. And then perhaps as well, work in situ where the customer is trying to achieve that outcome, work with trained researchers to think about actually how is it that they are looking to achieve those outcomes. So very, very easier said than done, but a very powerful concept to work with CPIs. And one area, for example, where we have done some work along these lines is in welfare services. So welfare services there were big issues, and it was creaking pre-pandemic. We've got an aging population globally, we know that. And of course, during the pandemic, that became even worse and really exposed the structure and some of the processes, etc. And they came to us and said, can you help us uncover what it is our citizens are looking for when it comes to welfare services. So we went out to 7,000 citizens and 600 execs that work in welfare services. And what we concluded was that the citizens wanted two simple things. They wanted easy access and they wanted responsiveness. So when they were looking for a service, they wanted a response. And as a result, down the line, we were then able to help them put in place a virtual visit function, a platform where citizens were able to, first of all, book their own appointment, share any documents that were going to be required, and we're also able in real time to start sort of having a conversation. So that's just one example of CPIs that you can put in place and then galvanize the team around it.
Well, look, thank you very much, Nina. That was very useful. Now what we're going to try and do is introduce two of our panelists so that we can continue that discussion, and two more thriving and striving marketers I couldn't be aware of. So the first person who's going to join us is Saurav Singhal, who's the Group Head of Marketing for Corporate and SME and Transaction Banking for DBS Bank. It's the Development Bank of Singapore, if my memory tells me rightly. It's one of the largest financial services groups in Asia. I only know because someone else also told me that I think it's regarded as the most stable or the most safe financial services group in the region, which is always a good thing. Saurav is from the Blue City in the northwest part of India and has lived and worked in 8 cities around the world with more than 8 multinational corporations across high tech, consumer tech and banking. And just for those of us who might not remember, I'm pretty sure that the Blue City is Jodhpur, but I'm sure Saurav can tell us whether I'm right or not. So thank you and welcome, Saurav. And then the other speaker I want to introduce, who's going to join us on our panel, is Maria Gideon, who's the Chief Marketing and Customer Officer for Chalhoub Group in the Middle East and North Africa. She opened her first company when she was only 18, which is a pretty entrepreneurial thing to do, and is also a former national ski champion. So there are many things. But rather than discussing too much of your life and history, what we probably want to do is talk about your work. So I suppose the first bit for both of you is, how have you managed to stay connected with your customers at a time when, to be honest, a lot of us have stopped going out and spent a lot more time on calls like this on Zoom? So Maria.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for having me. Nina, great presentation. Thank you for that. Great question, Alex. Chalhoub is in the business of luxury, retail, fashion, beauty. So very much bricks and mortars, as you can imagine. And I think it was such a challenge for the business to close down all of the stores, no more footfall, no more shopping malls, especially given the region where we live in, right? We live in Dubai and we're in the Middle East. So a lot of our business is truly driven by mall footfall and people being out and about. And I think it was a great trigger for us to accelerate that, digital transformation. The group has gone through a 900-day transformation even before I started. And I think luckily they had the right foundations and the right, the right tools in place, but I don't think they had anticipated, the use and the adoption that was required for them to truly create that movement. And I think it became very apparent, and with very quick turnaround, they launched platforms like clienteling, for example. So we acquired a tool that would allow all of our frontliners to connect with their customers directly through, a basic conversation, selling them products, delivering luxury to their homes, which was not something we used to do before, unless it was a very elite customer. So the whole way of purchasing has changed. We try to keep the conversation going through all of our platforms, obviously CRM, our loyalty members, and so on, to just keep everyone, aware of what was going on and new trends. And I think it was very apparent that, obviously that transformation was hugely accelerated, but it was hugely apparent that there was a desire for us to be more present digitally. I think we always really relied on the bricks and mortars, but given how, audiences are changing and, Gen Z is a lot more in tune with, shopping and luxury and so on, that we haven't really considered them to be like potential customers in the past. And with that, with the pandemic, we've realized how, all of these trends are changing, audiences, technology, and so on. I hope
what
that
metrics do you replace? I mean, if footfall is the metric you were using before and suddenly you can't use footfall because there isn't any, what do you replace it with? I mean, how are you trying?
So luckily we're back to business and we're doing better than 2019 because we don't really take 2020 into account. But I think, obviously engagement, conversions, all of your e-commerce metrics, revenue driven by all of the new sales channels, be it clienteling, be it e-com, be it like any of our omni-channel solutions. Nothing new really, but I think the way we measure and, the KPIs or some of the CPIs have changed as well. Our customer care center also became more of a sales center because customers were calling. We had to replace some of their products. So historically, we used to be like more an incoming platform for customers to ask for stuff, but it just became a two-way conversation. We moved to customer service, to customer care, and we have really changed the way we communicate with our customers. So we do have some CPIs, and I think it is definitely a challenge given how big the organization is. With 16,000 people, it's hard for everybody to be reporting in the same way. So that's something that we're very much focusing on this year.
I'm hugely reassured as a marketer that revenue is still the critical measure that comes out in all of these. I'm fascinated.
Revenue and experience, right? I think for us, it's you could drive immediate revenue with performance marketing, but it's the experience that will last, that ROX that we're talking about, and
And for you, Saurabh, I mean, in B2B corporate banking, I mean, what happens when you suddenly can't visit the clients who pay your salaries?
Yeah, great question. So I think before the pandemic happened, I think 2018, our CIO, one of our senior leaders, renamed or said DBS is the disappearing Bank of Singapore, or digital Bank of Singapore, because we wanted to disappear as a bank, and because we realized that banking is an essential service, banks are not. People want banking, they don't want to visit a bank. So I guess DBS had an advantage of being an early mover in that whole digitization and transformation journey and so on and so forth, and very well adopted in the consumer side. On the corporate banking side, where I sort of work, when the pandemic hit, the worst hit was the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, because those are the guys who were really struggling to keep their businesses afloat. And there was this strange phenomenon before the pandemic, which was every evening, these SMEs, hawker centers, clinic physicians and doctors would take all of their cash in their bags and visit a branch to drop the cash off. Now that wasn't possible anymore, right? And it cannot get more real than that you suddenly cannot deposit cash. So what we saw happening was a massive digital adoption on cashless payment technologies and many of those kind of things where they were accepting payments cashless. But what was important for us and for me as a marketeer was to really extend the help that the government was giving to SMEs. So there was a bunch of loans and relief measures announced by the government. The duty of the banks was to roll them out as soon as possible. And thankfully, with the digital infrastructure, we were able to launch the government loans on the same day when the government announced them, because we realized the importance of cash flow for these SMEs. They just wanted the money to keep their business afloat, to pay the salaries, and so on and so forth. So two things happened, right? One was, of course, there was a natural a need for businesses to move digital. And because DBS was quite ready in that sense, we were not reacting, we were responding to their requirements. And the second thing was our CEO said that in the pandemic, there'll be organizations will emerge on two sides. One will be heroes who will really help people. One will be villains who will actually make advantage of the situation and so on. And we definitely wanted to be on the hero side here. So I think we did everything we could to really enrich our customers, share a lot of insight. I remember even the very large organizations, so not just the SMEs, but very large organizations came to us and said, "Can you tell us how did you went from work from home? Because banks are known for security. You have to be in the office. You cannot be at home." And we went work from home within 2 days when the pandemic struck here. So customers were coming to us not just for banking advice, but advice like, how do I transform my company to start working from home? How does your IT infrastructure look like? And so on. And then what's future of retail? can you work with us and tell us will offices ever open? Because we have large clients who are in real estate industry. So you are suddenly adding a very different kind of value, which is beyond banking. And that all is being done through marketing. So that was quite fascinating.
It's absolutely amazing. And I think the truth is, I mean, you know, money and banking is the kind of blood in the body politic of society. It needs to kind of continue to circulate, otherwise the oxygen doesn't get to the right places, and you know, the brain dies and the people die, and you know, it's a essential function. And yet somehow in most countries there was a lot of discussion about the importance of, you know, I don't know, food production or, you know, those kind of, but somehow not so much on you know, protecting banking as a key kind of integral bit, and weirdly getting back, I think, to retail. So I think, you know, both of you have obviously been through this huge transformation. In terms of heroes and villains in your own businesses and your own metrics, are there any things you've been measuring that you now realize don't matter as much, or things that you've started to measure that you realize are now much more directional and important?
To be honest, just like I said, I don't think any of the metrics will disappear. It's just reprioritizing and making sure that they make more sense to that time. I think that like for like, it has definitely been impacted, because obviously we used to compare growth of certain metrics, and now I think we're reprioritizing, so you can't really see it in the same way. But I think we've also realized how important loyalty was and how important purpose was. For us, acquisition was really big, but you know, we realized that we had to take care of the population that we had already engaged with our brands and within our programs. So as much as, of course, we still care about acquiring new customers, it no longer has perhaps the same importance it used to have before. And for us, it's about, you know, making sure all of our stakeholders are happy. People, we used to measure, you know, OHI and the health of the organization, but I think now more than ever, it's become, you know, such an important thing that our people are happy, that they have the flexibility, that, you know, we are there for them, that we care for them. I think obviously everybody cared before, but it became so much more apparent that, you know, culture is playing such a big role today. And I don't think anyone has figured out like a culture index or a way to measure, you know, the culture in your organization. But, you know, culture is definitely something that we are, as an organization, one, hugely proud of, but also that we focus on a lot more. And we're trying to, you know, democratize culture as well, because as much as it is, you know, a part of the brand team or the CX team's remit or the HR team's remit, I think everybody should be looking at culture and be, you know, a part of just, you know, that change and that support and making sure that people are happy. Because if you have one link that breaks, obviously it just becomes, it just, you know, it doesn't work anymore.
And I think you're right. It's not delivered in a brand document. It's delivered by the outbound person calling, or the person who used to work in a shop who can't for the moment, but is still staying in touch with their customers. Or
Exactly.
And the same for you, Saurav. Suddenly people at home having to deal with clients who are, you know, as you say, worried about cash depositing, and you're trying to work out how to help them continue to be in business. Yeah.
I think for me, I always believe that, you know, when you're in a crisis, you have to go back to the basics. Which according to me is like, you know, when this happened, we started focusing on the last mile, and the last mile was not the top of the funnel, middle of the funnel metrics, but it was really, where are we losing customers? Is any customer not able to make the transaction that they should be able to make, because we want them done? So we have a system called presidential complaints, where the complaint straight away goes to our group CEO, and it could be as simple as, I don't like the language in the letter that you sent me, it's too intimidating about closing my business or whatever, all the way to saying that, you know, you're digital, but you're still asking me to fax or courier these papers and so on and so forth. So we have this presidential complaint thing which goes to our group CEO, and then it comes down to all departments to go and really figure out what's happening at that last mile. Why is the promise of the disappearing Bank of Singapore not being delivered? So I think we focused a lot. During the crisis, I remember we got many more presidential complaints because people were also getting used to the new way of banking and the new way of working. And I think that was good, because we really got to know what was happening on the ground, right? So I think that was a very critical step of presidential. The other thing was really, again, that customer centricity. I'll give you a very simple example. in one of our reviews, we were discussing about the different type of accounts, and we said, look, if the account balance falls below a certain limit, you charge a penalty to a customer. And the discussion was about why do we call it a penalty? Why can't we flip the coin and say, if you put more than certain amount, then I'll give you a reward. So very quickly you change the word from penalty of not putting so much money in the account to a reward of putting money in the account. And I think that to me talks a lot about the customer centricity and CPIs as we are discussing here. To say, it's about the customer. You cannot charge them for not doing something. You can reward them for doing something. So.
And I think for all of us who have been parents, and I suspect everyone listening who's ever been a parent, that's a very useful reminder sometimes that you get more with sugar than you do with vinegar sometimes. That it helps to encourage people to do the things you want them to do rather than to penalize them for not doing the things that you don't want them to do. And I think that's
what I meant by going back to the basics, and I think that's what we did.
No, I think that's very profound. So in terms of that, I mean, one of the other things I remember you talking about, Saurav, when we had a chat before, was that you had these kind of customer journeys that you were trying to fix and that you were trying to kind of prioritize those inside the business. Do you just want to tell us a little bit more about that story? Because I already stole it when we first had a chat a few weeks ago. I've already used it in another business. So I think it's a useful one to share on this call.
Absolutely. I think, so we, in all our scorecards, right, from the group CEO all the way down to whatever level you are, we have a big, thick middle portion, which is called iconic journeys. So every year as a bank, we identify 10 to 12 iconic journeys that we will just, as an organization, go and fix. And those journeys could be, let's say, reducing check usage or digitizing our cash operations, to all the way to foreign exchange. How do you deal with that, and so on. But as an organization, as a board, the organization comes together and identifies those 10 to 12 journeys, and the entire organization then goes through an entire 4D process, which is discover, define, develop, and deliver on those 10 to 12 journeys, where we start with problem statement. It's the classic design thinking framework, but we do a whole amount of design thinking on those iconic journeys. And at the end of the year, we report back on whether we've delivered successfully, and our bonuses are paid on that. I mean, if you're not delivering on those iconic journeys, then the group bonuses, my bosses, my bonus, my team's bonus, everything gets impacted if you're not delivering on those journeys. So they're very clear indicators, very clear success metric. Most of them are customer experience and customer related. And if you don't deliver, then it has a specific impact on your monetary rewards.
That raises a good question, actually. That might be one for you, Nina. Lots of companies struggle sometimes to identify those journeys, those customer needs, those expectations that are kind of going on. So I suppose, what things are you seeing that helps businesses pick, the 5, the 10, the digital customer experiences, things they really need to solve?
So what I would say is that most of the time, clients that we work with, it's not a question of not having the data or the knowledge or the insight. It's just a question, I think, of accessing it in the right way. And as we all know, if we look at the legacy organization, which many of our clients are, they are still inherently siloed. And I think often part of the first job to be done is starting to think about actually how together are we going to start breaking down those silos so that we can provide a single view of the customer, and so that we can provide access to what we need. And provided you can find a way of getting to the insight, then actually the rest of the work is not that difficult. The other piece that I would say that is so incredibly important as you work cross-functionally is just taking the time to have first of all a joint understanding, but then a joint vision, so that you know what you're moving towards. And that's where I think sometimes in the eagerness of moving really quickly, not enough time is invested of painting a picture of an understanding and making sure everyone has the same understanding of what the journey and the destination looks like before you try and move away from what you have today. So that's another area perhaps where we see clients of ours coming unstuck, and time and again we're finding ourselves saying, let's just pause, even if it takes another couple of weeks to do a really good quality job on that. That's why I would say. So I think most organizations know, but access it. And then once you've really started with the customer and you've got your insight, then really think about actually where is it then we're aiming for, and what ambition have we got to get there. That's why I would say, if I look across a cross section of our clients. And it's exciting, right?
Yeah,
it's really exciting work.
If I take that forward, Marie, into your area, I mean, so, I'm kind of old school, but I have actually been to a couple of your stores in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and you have some quite spectacular environments where you have carefully, curated and selected and made available, some of the finest luxury goods known to man in environments that are just beautiful. What is it that has changed for you in the last, kind of 12, 18 months about that kind of area? Because, those things are pretty easy when people are coming, but how do you get people to come when everyone's stopped coming, I suppose, is the question.
So like I said, Alex, I think we're very, very fortunate to be living in a place where business is back. So to a certain extent, we are trying to accelerate some of the initiatives that we've had either pre-pandemic or some of the things that we've learned during the pandemic. I think we will remain in the business of creating, experiences. Our programs are tailored around experiences. Even though we are retailers, we do really believe that it is the experience that is going to truly be the differentiator against all of our competition. So I think, the emphasis has changed towards, putting more effort and more work around that. I think I just echo everything that Saurabh and Nina just said around journey mapping and journey designing, and really, really embracing design thinking, because, some really basic examples are how siloed organizations used to deploy a tool or deploy a piece of technology and then think about the process first. So I think it took really like change management and a change of culture to get people used to designing the customer journey in the eye of the customer, and then layering all of your process, your people, your tech, your data, and so on, and truly looking at it, from the customer's point of view. And I think this is truly, it's taken time. I'm not gonna lie. It's not a solution that you can, adopt across an entire organization, but you could see that people now understand what that North Star is. People understand why you're doing things in a certain way, because that end-to-end journey does start with the customer, from merchandising to demand planning to supply chain. So ultimately, you're going to go back and look at the data from the customer, listening, social listening, trends, and so on and so forth. So it is very much, an area where I think we all want to play and do well. It's not easy, but we're getting there.
So the same principles, I suppose, we're just doing them with different tools, yeah? So. On that basis, for both of you, how do you then find and train the talent that you need in your teams to get those kind of tasks done? Because it's a bit more multifunctional and cross the business than maybe it used to be in the old days.
So Ravi, you want to go?
Okay, I can go, but no problem. So as Nina said earlier, right, a lot of business was being done in kitchens and all. So I did pick up gardening during the COVID times, right? And when you talk about talent, I mean, that's the best example I can think of. It's like really, you have to nurture the talent from within the organization. And it has to be a right mix of upskilling, putting them in the right challenge. I had a big task in front of me when I took over the team last year in January. It was only 3 months before COVID started, and which means I couldn't see my new team members, for a long period of time. And I was trying to bring 4 teams together. So there was a huge challenge in terms of how do you get people to talk to each other, work with each other, and people are burning out and they weren't able to talk to anyone. So I think we actually started a massive upskilling program within the marketing organization. Actually selected a bunch of courses, put together a whole learning curriculum for our marketing staff, and made it available to everybody and said, look, guys, this is the only way you can thrive, because as you rightly said, gone are the days when you could afford an event specialist in your team or or a content writer as a specialization, everybody had to go digital. So does that mean that my event specialists are no longer relevant? No. They now need to run digital events, which is webinars and podcasts and a whole lot of things. So it was a massive upskilling and this exercise. Yes, you have to find the right skill set. I mean, we are investing heavily in MarTech. So that talent, of course, I'm looking outside from to bring in the market, but that's something you have to do to upgrade your infrastructure. So yeah, I think that my biggest realization was really upskill your people, and that's the fastest way to scale.
Maria, any talent issues?
Look, quite similar to Saurabh as well. I think, we encourage all of our teams to remain curious, to keep learning themselves. It's a mix between classroom learning. We have something called Shalhoub University, so they're programs that are tailored and developed to the different parts of the business, whether they're frontliners, whether they're middle management, upper management, coaching. All of these programs exist. We even have an internal coaching and mentoring community. So we select a few coaches and a few mentors, and like the employees can select who they want to work with based on what challenges they have. And then, for me, I believe that one of the best ways of learning is to throw people into a project or in a squad, and as long as they have skin in the game, this is where they're going to learn. If you're going to measure their contribution to that project, this is where they're going to learn, sitting and listening, even if it's just an exec meeting and you bring in someone who shouldn't be in that meeting, but just the fact that they are there, they're going to hear and listen to how they see the interaction and the topic. And I've seen a lot of people grow and mature just by listening and sitting on projects that they have nothing to do with ultimately.
I think that's great. Now, you both talked about training and developing your teams. The other one I'm fascinated by at times like this is, I suppose, how you train and develop the companies from within. Because sometimes you get pushback from board colleagues, from other people in the business who, don't think you're taking it in the right direction. I'm sure Nina probably has a view on this as well. But I'm just kind of interested in, what are the barriers you've had to overcome sometimes that are internal, as well as the ones you're trying to deal with upskilling your teams?
Maybe I'll go again. Just to give Maria a break, but I think my biggest realization there was it's not so much of a hindrance or people want to block you, but I realized that the level of education of knowing what is marketing and what marketing can do for the business is such a huge difference between a marketeer like myself versus corporate banking as a domain, right? And I realized that many things that I was taking for granted to say, oh, people should know this is basic, right? I mean, you need to have a CRM, for example, and why CRMs are important. But you have to start a lot of that education to almost sell a dream internally. And your task as a CMO or as a head of marketing is as much selling the dream to your stakeholders and your bosses as much as it is to motivate and keep the morale high for your team members. So, and I realized that the moment you explain and you're able to articulate why you need to modernize the marketing function, why you need to upskill, why you need to invest in these channels, I think people are quite receptive, and maybe I'm blessed that DBS has that culture to say, yeah, if you have a good idea and you're willing to do it on your own, then more than welcome. Just don't come and say that there's a problem and expect somebody else to fix it. You come and tell the problem, go fix it yourself, and you're more than welcome to do it.
Sounds like a good model. Nina, what do you see in corporations with the need to kind of push open some of these doors and make things happen?
Yeah, so I think, and some clients have actually used exactly this language. There is an element of getting over, and someone said this to me as late as the other day, beginning of the week, you need to get over your own ego, because let's be honest, that sometimes if you sit as the leader of perhaps, let's say, a large marketing organization, and now you need to reach out much beyond that marketing organization, and knowing that perhaps it's not going to be functionally structured and orchestrated the way it once was, but you're now working as part of a different team, as we've talked about. that requires, you know, strength as a leader to not let that get in the way and actually say, I'm going to put that to one side and do the right thing by the customer. And the only way to deliver for the customer is to work together with my peers and my colleagues. So I think that's for me has been an important aspect. And that's not always an easy conversation to have with a client, but I think that's where, you know, again, as you said, Saurabh, where the vision and the possibility, the art of the possible comes in, that you can then use to galvanize. One other thing, just to comment, Alex, on talent, that we have found is that this way of working has almost democratized and broken down hierarchy. So we have found with teams, both internally and with our clients as well, that it's actually made it easier for different people at different levels, perhaps in an organization, to talk to one another, because almost when you've worked out that the dog was barking in the background, or you had a problem with a plumber who was coming, whatever it may be, you've broken down some of the barriers, and actually it becomes about, you know, at a more human level, sharing perhaps a business problem and connecting over that, and getting rid of some of what might otherwise get in the way. So that's something else that's been quite fascinating from a human perspective, I think, both with clients and for us internally as well, to see how that plays out.
Okay, thanks. Hey, look, we have a couple of audience questions as well. So I'll start with the first one, just because I think it's a very useful way of bringing us all to account slightly. The question is, what about the aspects of customer experience you can't measure? How do we make sure you're not just focusing on the things that are measurable at the expense of what might be very important unmeasurables? So just be good to get all of your views on that. So do you want to go first, Maria?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's not one or the other. For me, it's the big data and the small data. If you don't observe, if you don't listen, if you don't, then you have no way of finding out what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And you know, the leadership here is so big on us being in the stores, being in the markets, talking to customers, just observing, because if you don't do that, and you're just looking at a spreadsheet, you're never really going to understand, you know, behavioral issues or things that you can change, and so on and so forth. And it goes all the way back to, I don't know if you guys know about the Ritz-Carlton podium that they put for children, right? They've realized that you know, children couldn't actually be a part of the check-in experience. So they've raised the podium and to make sure that the kids are, but unless you really sit and watch and understand some of these areas, and you can't really, these aren't things that you can measure or put a number against, in my opinion. So for me, it is really important to have a good balance of both, and to also listen to what the business and the people on the floor are saying. So we have something called employee NPS, and that's the feedback that the employees bring back to the business for us to make substantial improvements and changes along the journey. So
employee NPS. Saurabh, any particular?
No, I agree with Maria. I think the main thing we have to all focus on is listening, right? How easy do you make it for the customer to tell you something? I mean, and if you're willing to listen, and if you make it easy for them to tell you something, and of course, nobody's going to call your call center and give you a feedback, positive, or, I mean, unless they are really pissed. But if you create more and more channels for customers to leave feedback, then that just creates a huge opportunity to listen. The issue then happens is that there are so many channels. How do you integrate those channels so that you have an integrated voice of customers? It's something we have been working on as a bank to create what we call internally IVOC, which is integrated voice of customer, where you collect the feedback from chatbot, from your website, from your call centers, from your product post logout surveys. So you're on your mobile banking app and you log out, and can I quickly just ask you today, how was your experience? Is thumbs up or thumbs down? And that's it, right? You don't need them to give you a lot of questions. That just makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, these pulse checks, these quick, you know, test and learn kind of like surveys. I think these are great sometimes for quick feedback. I agree, Saurabh.
Cool. Well, actually, I mean, look, before we come to a conclusion, because at some point I have the miserable job of trying to conclude these events as we kind of get to toward the end. But I mean, I think they're one for all three of you, which would be very useful as a kind of final piece of advice. I suppose it's been an interesting 18 months as people, as businesses, as communities, as a world. Any advice you've got for marketers would be very handy. So I don't know whether it's easier to frame it even, what behaviors and learnings have you made in the last year that you'll keep for the next one, or that you'll hope you never have to do again, I suppose?
Look, for me, it's perhaps three things. One is stay curious, because I think it's so important that you keep reinventing yourself and you keep, learning and finding new things out, because this is what's going to let you grow, especially as leaders, because you think that, at some point you've gotten to, a position or point where, you're not really learning anything anymore. Empathy, for me, I know it's been used and abused, but I don't think there's a better time to talk about empathy after this whole pandemic. And, understanding your customer, I don't think it's never been more important, because, when everything is working and business is thriving, you tend to do a lot less digging because you think everything's working. So now I think we're all forced to going back to basics and talking and listening to customers. And I think integrity is one of my biggest values. So it's also very important that you stick to your word. And if you promise something, just, whether it's to a colleague, to a friend, to a family member, remember that, your word counts. So don't take that for granted. So my 2 cents.
Nina, do you want to go next?
I'd love to. So I think from my perspective, probably a couple of things, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything you've just said, Maria, as well. I think authenticity rules for me, and I think the pandemic and new ways of working and have really brought that to the fore, and I think that's so important, and that's just been demonstrated. And then I think, despite, we were talking age earlier at the beginning of this call, always be in a position, and it goes back to what you said, Maria, around curiosity, be willing to reappraise and rethink and reevaluate things. And if whatever you did have isn't quite right for whatever reason, then take the time to reimagine and think about what it could be. And that's excitement, and that will keep us going for many years to come, I think. So, and if we don't, then we've heard what is currently happening to the survivors, and that's not so good. So thrive and reappraise and reimagine. That would be my 2 pennies worth, I think.
Right. And Saurav?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest one key thing is, as I said earlier also, when in crisis, go to the basics. When you're stable, invest in the future. I think that's something that we all have realized. The other thing is be helpful, right? I think you just can be very, very take it with a helpful attitude. Help your people, help your employees, help your customers. I think the pandemic has taught us a lot about just being helpful, and a token of appreciation to whoever helps you. It goes a long way. So just be human. Yeah.
I am always loving marketers saying be human, because we're all human. I mean, I think if there's one useful bit of advice in life, that's definitely going to be it. So I completely agree with that. Well, look, thank you. The easy bit for me now is I get told off by Lauren if I overrun. So I'm acutely aware we've got about a minute left before I have to finish. So the first thing is to say thank you. Thank you to all the panel participants. It's been a good conversation. We've covered quite a lot. There's still a lot left to do. Thank you also to Accenture for partnering with the Marketing Society on this. What Lauren traditionally does is try and summarize, which I've neither got the time nor the ability, I suspect, to try and capture the richness of that conversation. But we usually try and summarize some stuff, and we'll share it with you via email afterwards. If you've got any feedback, you usually get a kind of pop-up quiz feedback form thing that you can fill in now. So please, if you get a chance, try and fill that in. And while you're thinking about how to fill in the feedback poll, there's a couple of things coming up. So the annual conference for the UAE, for London, and for Hong Kong all comes up in next month in November. And the 2021 theme is Changemakers Unite. So don't forget to join your local conference. There'll be other stories, other speakers. Maybe clearly, this is where Sophie kicks me under the table. They won't be as good as Maria and Saurav and Nina have been, but you know, there'll be good speakers, I promise you. The next global conversation will be around sustainability, which is ahead of the 2021 UN Climate Change Conference. And keep an eye out for more information. Thank you for your time today. And thank you very much to our speakers who make my life very easy by saying interesting things. And then I can shut up and just conclude at the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Alex.
So much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.